shocked, disappointed, and frankly confused. Thomas Tuchel was supposed to be the man to unlock England's golden generation. Instead, he just triggered a shockwave that could tear the Three Lions apart. According to leaks ahead of Friday's official announcement, two massive names are being left at home: Phil Foden, Harry Maguire, and a third, Trent Alexander-Arnold, hanging by a thread. ESPN UK pundits are fuming. Former England stars are calling it personal. And one Man United captain just went public with his fury. Welcome to the Tuchel Civil War. Let's start with the most unbelievable name on this list: Phil Foden. The same Phil Foden who was once labeled England's most gifted attacker. The same player Pep Guardiola called the most talented he's ever seen. Not going to the World Cup. According to the BBC, Tuchel has made his decision. The reason? A goal drought stretching back to December. 0 goals for Manchester City in months. And a seat on Pep's bench that's gotten way too comfortable. Then there's Harry Maguire. The Manchester United centre-back has resurrected his career. 3rd place in the Premier League. And Maguire didn't stay quiet. I think there's something personal at play here. In footballing terms, there's no reason for it. And finally, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Trent has made one appearance for England since Tuchel took charge. He hasn't been picked in almost a full year. This despite playing for Real Madrid and having the kind of season that would put most right-backs to shame. Gary Lineker, an England legend, is baffled.
Jules, it was supposed to be Friday, wasn't it? What's going on?
That's right, Dan. Tomorrow morning, 9:45. As often with those lists, there's a lot of things are leaking because Thomas Tuchel would have called some of the players on the list that we just showed who won't be going to the World Cup, for example. So they've known about it and they can obviously express their feelings on social media, talk to agents, who then talk to journalists, talk to family members, who then talk to journalists. I think the FA itself and the England setup, like for us with Frank in France, we often know a few hours before who is very likely to be in, who is guaranteed to be in, who is not going to be in, and things like that. I think it's very different for each country. Some don't say anything and don't leak anything and everybody finds out at the same time, a bit like what we saw with Brazil and Carlo Ancelotti. For others, more in Europe, it's a little bit more freestyling, let's say.
Right then, Nadim, you're the Englishman on the panel. You get to speak for us all. Let's start, shall we, with the absence of... where should we start? Should we, like, Cole Palmer's a surprise, isn't it? Is it? No?
Yes and no. I think Cole Palmer's had a disappointing season.
I was going to go next. Did you want to say it?
No,
Okay, sorry. Go on.
I was just in.
Go on, Nadim.
I'm going to agree with Shaka, to be fair, for the most part, because Cole Palmer's probably had his most disappointing season so far since he's been at Chelsea. So I understand that one. You could make the same case for Phil Foden, who's not regular starter at Man City. Morgan Gibbs-White has actually had an excellent season for Nottingham Forest, so that one in itself is interesting. And Adam Wharton, I think, for many people, they see in terms of two of the most up-and-coming players, there's him and Elliot Anderson in that midfield. But Tuchel is somebody who, is very principled and he knows what he likes and he's not going to budge from that. I think another example is, say, Lewis Hall. I thought he was one of the best left-backs that England could have going into this World Cup. But again, Tuchel says, no, absolutely not. So I think in some ways it's crazy to think that in a 26-man squad, some of the talent that's there still doesn't make the cut. But Tuchel knows his objective is to win this World Cup. And he's not going to do it by making any decisions on people who he's not so sure about. And unfortunately for those players, that's exactly how he sees them.
It's interesting, Jules, because obviously there's kind of a contradiction here, because you could say, well, if he's gone for players in form, why has he left out Gibbs-White? And if he's gone for experience, why has he left out the likes of Phil Foden?
Yeah, you're right. I think every case is different. And again, we see that with a lot of those national teams and those squads. We said it often enough on the show, and Deschamps says it all the time. It's not the 26 best players in your country or the 26 most talented players in your country. It's the 26 that for 8 weeks we live together 24/7 in a bubble with hardly any contact with the outside world. And you have to make sure that those 26 can actually go through all of that together in the best of ways. So there's not one that might be super talented, but is going to mess the whole balance of your squad up, for example. And I think that's also part of the thinking for managers like Tuchel or Deschamps or Ancelotti. on how they build their squad. It's very different than what we would have done, saying, okay, he's in form, okay, he's great, he's super talented, he's very good, I want him. Sometimes it's far more difficult than that. So you can understand, even with all that depth, that unfortunately some of those super talented players are not going to make it.
Is Ivan Toney a surprise for you, Nadem? Obviously playing his trade now in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, he is a surprise to me, but not necessarily because he's in Saudi Arabia, because we have seen him play before for England. But it's more so the fact that I don't know, almost feels like it slid under the radar a little bit that Tuchel was going to be turning to him for this World Cup. I think, obviously, it's my sort of living in a bubble as such that I couldn't tell you how many goals he scored. I couldn't tell you the form that he's in. I couldn't tell you, say, his general style of play right now. But, you know, those stats there, they kind of speak for themselves. But it's the first time that I'm seeing, and it's the first time I've chased it up myself. But is he going as a backup striker for Kane? How does, say, Tuchel see him? Does he see somebody that can work alongside Kane in the side? You know, these are the questions that, you know, Tuchel's probably thought about and decided that, yes, Ivan Toney can work really well with a Harry Kane. Maybe the play that they have, it complements each other. But, you know, I quite like an Ollie Watkins as well. So it'll be interesting to see that Tuchel, should the game become stretched or you want to make a change, which one of those four he's going to turn to. But, yeah, the Ivan Toney one, it seems to come out of left field. But, you know, congratulations to him for making that squad.
Frank, I'm sure you've had sleepless nights about this squad. Your thoughts?
Yes, but I think Jules made a very important comment in a way that is not the best 26 players that you have seen this season. I think Tuchel is making sure that he has the first 11, then he's going to double every positioning, and therefore, you know, you're going to have disappointments. And I'm sure Gibbs White, maybe Cole Palmer or Phil Foden, they don't do double, but they triple the positioning. So it's why he didn't pick them. I mean, for sure, he's not the best 26 players. Everybody is a coach. He's a national team coach in England, like it is in France, and everybody has a different opinion. I'm not sure that would have been picked if we would have picked the 22 best players in France at the time that I was picked for France, but it is what it is. I'm kidding, of course, but really, it's yeah, of course. I gave him a big check, you know, so he has to pick me. But really, I think you have to think through and listen to the idea of what Tuchel has about the team sheet that he wants to get, and maybe double a positioning or maybe triple one, especially the strikers, or maybe in the middle of the park, because he wants to be strong, and that's what Aimé Jacquet did. And he had his name, his first team, his first 11, and again doubles it. It's why some has been sacrificed because you have four fantastic players in the same position, and you have to make a choice.
Shaka, you lived in England for many a year. You've lived through many of these World Cup and Euros excitements, and you know the fuss that's made of these sort of announcements.
Yeah, and fuss is made of the tournaments in general, and then somehow it all ends in you upset, Dan.
Why is that made put a smile on your face?
I don't know why that made me smile so much. I really don't know why that made me happy.
Enjoy that.
Listen, I'm with your group here. I think the biggest kind of surprise to me is Gibbs White, who I thought had an outstanding season. I didn't think he could be excluded if we're going on purely on form. And the inclusion of Ivan Toney, as Nadem was alluding to, again, kind of surprises me. Kind of given some of the issues that many a team has had with strikers in that position. We've not seen any of them in Saudi Arabia, but if you were playing that well, you just felt that we would have heard of a link, even though he's 30 years old, with somebody back in England. Maybe that comes...
He's got a goal a game in Saudi Arabia, Shaq.
Yeah, that's Saudi Arabia, Dan.
Yeah.
Again, if you were showing that kind of form, I just felt you would have heard some kind of rumour, at least by now, about a return to England. I certainly haven't, so it surprises me to see him in there, and that at least Tuchel regarded him and regards his form as highly as he does. That one I didn't see coming.
But we've seen it in the French squad, haven't we? Call-ups from the Saudi League that worked out, Jules.
Yeah, absolutely. The strange things in the Toney case, really, is that Tuchel never called him, never played him. He played 2 minutes at the end of the game against Senegal that they lost a year ago, pretty much, and then nothing since, which is very unusual. I mean, I like the Toney pick, and I think Toney offers something different to Watkins and Kane, like Nadem said. Also, I think for me, and with all the omissions of the other number 10s, so no Foden, no Palmer, and no Gibbs White, that means that in Tuchel's mind, Kane can play in that position with Bellingham and Rodgers, who are going to be the other two number 10s, really. And hence, if you count Kane as a 9 and a 10, that gives you another option for another 9. So Watkins and then Tony, when we all thought there would only be 2 number 9s because he's only going to play with 1 up front. So I think it's interesting to see that. And that's the only thing I would say is like Tuchel had hardly seen Tony play for England, and yet he thought, let's bring him, his experience, he's been at Euros before and World Cups, etc. And yeah, but you're right, we saw N'Golo Kante going to Saudi Arabia and still coming back with the national team and be very efficient.
We know how Jordan Henderson...
Yeah, but the thing...
Go on, Joe.
Sorry. I really think that he picked Tony instead of maybe Gibbs White because maybe he knows that Tony won't complain if he doesn't have any minute during the tournament. That he has a choice with of course Kane and one other. I don't remember Watkins, of course. And if he doesn't use Tony won't complain. What would be the idea of being on the bench from Gibbs White? Maybe he doesn't know, or maybe he knows too much. Maybe the guy will complain, like Foden will have complained. Maybe Palmer will have complained as well. So maybe he doesn't want that. And he wants to find the chemistry with the team, and that's very crucial, very important to find that. And Tony is so happy that he will be only happy to be there. And if he has a chance to play, he will take his chance. But if he doesn't, he won't create any problem, any issue to Tuchel.
Jules mentioned it, Nedum. 8 weeks, of course, in a bubble. You have to try and get on with everybody. Jordan Henderson's inclusion, how much does it factor in how personable he is and how much of a leader he is amongst these players?
Yeah, I think Thomas Tuchel must have seen something from him that suggests, he's an important part of that group. And obviously, I think it's fair to say that he won't be getting a ton of minutes at the tournament. But I think from when the manager will look down the bench to see people who could come on and say have an impact, have an influence and understand the state of the game, I think he's good for that. And Jordan, having played in multiple of these tournaments, as is the case with a few others like John Stones and others, that will make a difference, because I think it's fair to say, even from a human standpoint, you can go stir crazy when you're away for such a long period of time, surrounded by people who you wouldn't necessarily choose to be around anyway, add in the context and the heightened pressure of playing in those tournaments. And, for England and others, the expectation is to win it, so every performance is critiqued on a deeper level, like we saw at the Euros 2 years ago. So I think Jordan Henderson being like a safe pair of hands in there for Tuchel to understand some of these younger players, to help pass on the messaging and so on, but then still drive the standards on a day-to-day basis. I think that is obviously important, and credit to Jordan, in my opinion, for still being fit and available to be able to do it.
Meanwhile, one of the first leaks that we read this morning was Harry Maguire taking to social media saying that he'd been left out. He was disappointed, but he, of course, wishes the team, the standard isn't, wish the team the best. You look at these centre-backs, Nedum, they don't exactly blow your socks off.
I mean, are they supposed to? Are they supposed to blow my socks off?
Well,
You're looking at, say, Mark Gahey there. Come on, don't do that. You're better than that. But anyway, I think Ezri Konsa has done very, very well. I think he's been one of the best centre-halves in the Premier League for the last few seasons. He's the Europa League winner. He's someone that Unai Emery trusts week in, week out. Mark Gahey's been brilliant for these last 2 years, especially his last 6 months for Man City. John Stones, we've seen him, perform really well for England in the last few tournaments where they've had the chance to be able to, to lift trophies, and obviously it's not worked out well. And then Konsa's had a good season, and Dan Burn, I think, has proven to be reliable. But I think it's more or less going to be those bottom 3 centre-halves. They're going to be, looked at by Tuchel to try and progress the team forward. Obviously, things could change. You could spin it, maybe put in like a Reece James in there, depending on what the game sort of state is as such. But I think as far as it goes, whether it was John Stones, Mark Gahey or Ezri Konsa starting it for England, if everything else around them works well, I think it gives them a good opportunity.
So you agree with the exclusion of Harry Maguire?
I think it's a tough one, to be honest. I think for the way that Tuchel appears to want to be, maybe he wants, a bit more sort of like mobility in and around there. In fact, as good as Harry Maguire has been this season, as good as he's been in the past, I think he probably just sees a different type of game that he wants to play from his England perspective, and probably sees how the opposition might play against them as well. So I think it's hugely disappointing given how successful he has been for England, relatively speaking. Obviously, he's not lifted a trophy, but he's been a stalwart across these last 6 or 8 years, however long it's been for them. So I kind of get it in some ways, because you could see that he was kind of turning to be on the periphery. And as is the case with potentially John Stones in years to come, people are going to start looking the other way and bringing in other types of player. But I think he only wanted one of those, and it was going to be Stones or Maguire. And I think he prefers the style of player John Stones and the versatility that it can bring. But Harry Maguire, to be give him the credit, he's had a good season, as is Luke Shaw, for example.
Frank, you're a defender.
Yeah, it's sad for Maguire, but I can understand. I mean, nowadays, when you play, imagine you play, Maguire plays against France, and you play against Mbappe, Olise, Doué, and those players who are so fast, he's gonna struggle. And having him on the bench might be a problem because of his character and the strong character that he has. And maybe Tuchel prefer Quensa, and Quensa knows that if he doesn't play, he won't create any problem. So I have no problem with the players that Tuchel should get. It's only sad because it's true that Harry Maguire has been very important for Manchester United, but it is what it is. And again, you have to make choices, and the choices that Tuchel is making are, for me, the best.